Okay, so what is autism spectrum disorder? Well, according to the Big American Book of Disorders and Deficiencies, also known as the DSM-5, which is basically the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, which, apart from being a mouthful, is an intensely depressing read, by the way. But go find it if you're really interested. So according to them, those of us on the autism spectrum are differentiated from those on the normal spectrum by the following criteria. Apparently, we have persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts as manifested by the following. What does this mean? Most helpfully, they break this down into 3 subcategories for us. 1. Deficits in social emotional reciprocity, ranging from abnormal and social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation to reduced sharing of interests, emotions or affect, or failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. 2. Deficits in non-verbal communicative behaviours used for social interaction, ranging from poorly integrated verbal and non-verbal communication to abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of gestures to a total lack of facial expression and non-verbal communication. That covers a lot. Deficits, that word again, in developing, maintaining and understanding relationships, ranging from difficulties adjusting behaviour to suit various social contexts to difficulties in sharing imaginative play or in making friends to an absence of any interest in peers. So basically, I think that means that we have a tendency to come across sometimes as arrogant or disinterested, unemotional, rude, out of touch, that we can have difficulty making friends and sustaining relationships and engaging in the normal back and forth that's expected in conversation, and our body language can also be out of sync with the situation. The other criteria that differentiates people on the autism spectrum from those on the normality spectrum is apparently restricted, repetitive patterns of behaviour, interests or activities as manifested by at least 2 of the following. Helpfully, they give us 4 to choose from. The first one, stereotyped or repetitive speech, motor movements or use of objects, e.g., simple motor stereotypes, lining up toys, flipping objects, echolalia or idiosyncratic phrases. 2. Insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routine or ritualized patterns of verbal or non-verbal behavior. They example this as extreme distress at small changes, difficulties with transitions, rigid thinking patterns, greeting rituals, and the need to take the same route or eat the same food every day. 3. Highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity. So being passionate about something. Where is the boundary between being really passionate about something and being abnormal in its intensity or focus? And they give an example of attachment or preoccupation with unusual objects, excessively circumscribed or perseverative interests. Number 4, either hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment, e.g. apparent indifference to pain or temperature, adverse response to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, visual fascination with lights or movement. You then move into how long these symptoms have been present and whether or not they cause a clinically significant impairment in a social, occupational, or another important area of life. And then they try to ascertain whether or not your differences are better explained by an intellectual disability or a developmental delay. Now, reading the above criteria is really somewhat dehumanizing, and it starkly clarifies the difference for me between myself and the majority of humans that I've associated with. Yes, I'm still calling them humans. To make matters more complicated, females tend to present differently to males, and as such, we tend to get missed more often. Our need to fit in with our peers appears to be stronger, and we quickly learn to mimic those around us to hide our, what we feel like, I think, is our seemingly unwelcome selves. So what are some of the ways that females present differently? We're often perceived as shy or introverted. We tend to mimic others. We try more to camouflage or mask our differences than males. Males do this too, but women tend to do it more. We can apparently be overly intense and possessive about our friendships or relationships. We're frequently bullied at school. We often have advanced language skills for our age. We have a better range and frequency of non-verbal communication than boys. And we find it easier to slip into imaginative play. Females struggle more with a lack of identity. And we often retreat into, quieter hobbies such as reading. We spend a lot of time with books and researching. We tend to be very creative or sometimes musical. Emotionally, we can be immature, and this can make us very, very vulnerable. I'll have an episode on vulnerability for autistic females a bit later. We're often highly sensitive and prone to anxiety and anxious feelings about stuff. And we are regularly misdiagnosed with either bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. Now, those are the most common differences. But if you're after a really well-researched and comprehensive list, I suggest you pop over and see what Mum on the Spectrum has to say. I've placed a link in the description below. I watched this particular episode and I burst into tears because this comprehensive list that has been put together by herself and others was me to a T. Seeing that chart was probably one of the most validating moments in my life, in my journey to discover who I am. So if you're a female and you think you may be on the spectrum, pop on over, check with her, then come back here and let me know what you think. Thank you.